Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking what is, frankly, a massive industrial and geopolitical bottleneck. We're looking at how a total breakthrough in edge artificial intelligence is completely redefining international trade compliance. I mean, right now, as we speak, the province of Ontario is on a literal ticking clock, staring down the complete exhaustion of its landfill capacity. And at the exact same time, the cross-border waste trade corridor between Ontario and Michigan, well, it's rapidly becoming a battleground of intense regulatory protectionism and escalating tariffs. It's a perfect storm. But from within this crisis, an incredibly sophisticated technological solution has emerged. Today, we are going to look closely at how the 905 Wood digital refinery acts as the ultimate link, what we're calling the Sentient Bridge, between unregulated construction debris and the ultra-strict global biocarbon market. By leveraging the bleeding-edge AI capabilities of the Google Pixel 10 Pro, powered by its revolutionary Light RT stack, this system completely bypasses those geopolitical hurdles. It's a real game changer, and I can't wait to get into it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the deep dives today. We'll start by breaking down the macroeconomics of the Ontario landfill crisis and cross-border trade friction. Then we'll shift gears into the technological solution, the Sentient Bridge and its specific edge AI hardware interface. Finally, we'll look at automating customs compliance and securing economic sovereignty.
All right, part one, the Ontario landfill crisis. Let's look at exactly how urgent this problem is. When you map out the chronological urgency of this, the ticking clock becomes incredibly loud. Back in 2021, an Auditor General report flagged a massive issue. Almost 1.6 million commercial and institutional establishments in the province were simply not properly regulated regarding waste diversion. The Ministry of Environment had already fallen far behind its own targets. Then, by 2024, a provincial strategy to mandate organic waste reduction was just paused, completely stalled critical progress. Fast forward to 2026, and the City of Toronto was actually forced to implement a 3.75% interim solid waste fee increase. Now, you might think of that as just an economic symptom, but actually, scratch that. It's more like a massive red flag of a deeply strained system. But the most alarming data point we found is this. Based on current consumption and disposal rates, it's estimated that Ontario has only 9 years left. Just 9 years, until its domestic landfill space is completely 100% exhausted. And that brings us to this absolutely staggering figure, 12 million. That is the sheer volume, in tons, of garbage generated annually in the province of Ontario. To put that into perspective for you, that's enough waste to fill the Rogers Centre nearly 16 times over every single year. It's hard to even picture that much trash. The crux of this entire issue lies within the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors, usually called the ICI sector. See, while individual residential families actually do a decent job recycling about 50% of their waste, the institutional and commercial sectors are largely failing to divert anything. They severely lack strict adherence to essential frameworks like the Ontario Government OREG 347 for general waste management. And because of that lack of regulatory enforcement, they are just flooding the system with unprocessed, highly valuable materials. The bureaucratic reality of this crisis is perfectly captured in an April 2026 memorandum from the Niagara Region Waste Management Services regarding the state of waste. Behind the scenes, municipalities across the province are actively scrambling. They are desperately trying to assess their landfill reports, holding emergency steering committee meetings, and drafting internal memos because the reality of that 9-year deadline is officially setting in. Local governments are waking up to the fact that they have to manage a crisis fundamentally driven by private sector waste flows over which they currently have practically zero regulatory control. Moving on to part two, cross-border trade friction. This is where the domestic issue becomes a transnational one. So, the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors alone produce about 7.2 million tons of waste annually. That is roughly 60% of the province's total volume. Now, prepare yourself for a rather shocking statistic from our research. 98% of these entities do not engage in active recycling. 98%! And because local municipal restrictions just don't apply to these private commercial contracts, the private haulers simply bypass domestic landfills entirely. It's easier for them to just load this chaotic, completely unregulated waste into fleets of trucks and ship it directly over the border to Michigan, taking full advantage of historically lower disposal costs over there.
So, the crucial point is that this cross-border reliance, it's just no longer economically safe. As global trade pacts enter what looks like a decade of rolling uncertainty, the Ontario-Michigan waste corridor is suddenly facing severe protectionist headwinds.
We are talking about a high-friction environment where importers face wildly escalating insurance liabilities for cross-border transit. And worst of all, there's the looming threat of punitive 10% global tariffs driven by USMCA and CUSMA trade disputes. The days of cheaply dumping raw wood and construction waste across the border are literally coming to an end. Which brings us to part 3, the Sentient Bridge. This is where the July 2026 intelligence notes introduce the core technological fix. This structural geopolitical vulnerability brings us to the ultimate solution. The 905 Wood Digital Refinery acts as what's being called the Sentient Bridge. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, it serves as the highly intelligent digital link connecting the messy, utterly chaotic flow of construction demolition waste directly to the ultra-strict high-purity requirements of the advanced global biocarbon market. Instead of paying exorbitant transportation premiums and dealing with massive tariffs just to truck raw waste into a hostile international border, this system processes and upcycles that carbon-rich stream locally. It completely bypasses the political noise of cross-border trade disputes simply by removing the need to export the waste in the first place.
I absolutely love this visionary quote from the intelligence notes because it perfectly frames the fundamental truth of the circular bioeconomy. Geopolitical borders might close, but physics and economics don't lie. Think about that. Converting a massive municipal liability, literal garbage that Ontario has no room to bury, into a highly valuable premium domestic commodity is an unstoppable economic force. It's a pure physics and economics play that guarantees industrial resilience. Let's look at how this philosophy translates into the actual hardware being deployed in the dirt and dust of the field. Part 4, Edge AI Hardware Interface. Let's do a micro-technological deep dive here. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer computing power being pushed to the extreme edge. This entire incredibly compliance operation is operationalized totally locally on the Google Pixel 10 Pro. It's powered by the brand new Android 16 operating system and relies heavily on Google's bleeding-edge LiteRT AI stack. The whole setup is specifically optimized for local tensor processing, right on the device's Tensor G5 TPU. Because this hardware architecture is so insanely efficient, it functions with absolute zero latency, and the best part, it operates completely offline, no cloud connection required. This is an absolutely crucial feature because, let's be real, these construction and waste intake yards are often located in remote areas with zero reliable cell connection. Let's meticulously walk through exactly how the 905 Wood Digital Refinery workflow operates in the field. Step 1. The field operator simply points their Pixel 10 Pro camera at a completely chaotic pile of incoming construction debris. Almost instantly, the LiDAR AI stack executes real-time computer vision and semantic categorization, but it goes way deeper than just saying, hey, that's wood. The system runs a digital 12-stage toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, or TCLEP, pre-screening to sniff out hidden contaminants. Finally, the application performs an incredibly accurate high-purity wood-grade classification, assessing both the exact species and the moisture content. And what makes this computational magic possible? By utilizing advanced turboquant compression, this device seamlessly harmonizes a whole ensemble of frontier models simultaneously. We are talking about running Gemini 3.1 Pro, Gemini 3 Flash, Claude Sonnet 4.6, Claude Opus 4.8, and even massive frameworks like GPT-OSS 120B. They run entirely on-device to instantly refine physical chaos into structured, categorized, auditable digital data. Moving right along to Part 5, Automating Customs Compliance. This is where the AI secures the business logistics. And this brilliantly illustrates the engine of the digital refinery in full action. Notice how the application automatically maps the physical input directly to a legally binding digital output. Say a client is navigating SUSMA's notoriously strict rules. The app automatically verifies the unregulated wood debris against the wholly obtained rules of origin check. It instantly outputs a certified domestic biocarbon status. For tricky customs codes, it cross-references mixed construction materials directly against strict HTSUS Chapter 38 classification rules, specifically targeting clean biocarbon feedstocks. By processing this instantaneously on the device, the system absolutely guarantees tariff-exempt status for the upcycled commodity. The contrast between the old way and the new way is just staggering. I mean, look at traditional trade exports. The old paper-based cross-border system requires heavy, error-prone manual intervention. It's highly susceptible to port delays, carries massive insurance liability, and leaves shippers completely vulnerable to those 10% global tariffs we talked about.
In sharp contrast, the 905 Wood digital refinery application workflow perfectly manages the entire request for a quote, or RFQ, process from start to finish via its highly intuitive UI and UX. It completely automates the certificate of origin alongside all verification and compliance protocols. The exact moment the field operator finishes that Edge AI scan, the system outputs instant, legally binding PDF documentation. It literally eliminates logistical friction on the spot.
Finally, Part 6, Securing Economic Sovereignty. Bringing it all back to the big picture. By operationalizing this hardware and putting the unprecedented power of advanced offline Edge AI directly into the hands of field operators, 905 Wood is doing so much more than just managing a localized waste crisis. It is definitively securing Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. Because it's so tightly regulated and auditable, this high-purity biocarbon commands massive green premiums in lucrative sectors like clean energy and industrial metallurgy. So instead of desperately paying to export a liability, Ontario is engineering its own economic sovereignty in a post-USMCA world. It's turning the ticking clock of landfill exhaustion into a powerful, sustainable engine for domestic industrial growth. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. The Sentient Bridge has definitively proven that technology can, in fact, outmaneuver trade wars and resource depletion. As geopolitical borders continue to tighten, as unpredictable tariffs threaten traditional logistics, and as our domestic landfills rapidly approach total closure, how will your supply chain adapt to the new physics of the global circular bioeconomy? The tools to survive and truly thrive in this new era are no longer science fiction. They are already operating right now at the edge. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.